You want it? We have it. The hottest mortgage and real estate strategy broadcast in the nation. A Smarter Way Home with your host, Danielle Boote and Victor Bals. 50 years combined experience, ranked in the top 1% in the nation for home loan originations 2020. Promise to expand your knowledge, utilizing creative mortgage financing and home buying strategies. Build a bridge for a better quality of life. Get your brain cells firing for a smarter way home. And welcome to another episode of A Smarter Way Home. Modern mortgage solutions and home buying strategies for real estate professionals and consumers alike. I am your host, Victor Bals, 22 years in the loan origination business, and I have my hostess with the mostest, Mrs. Danielle Boote. Good morning to you.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I am good, and it's a beautiful day in Michigan, and I heard on the weather they cut it down to 2 seasons. We've got summer and winter, and that's all we have now.
That is what it feels like these days, doesn't it?
Yeah, we are actually 12 degrees above normal
After
for
being
May.
20 degrees below normal for April.
Yes, but it doesn't stop the real estate market from being hot and the building market from being hot. And today we have a very special guest from the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Danielle, why don't you take it over and introduce our guests?
Yes, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dawn Crandall. She is the Executive Vice President of Government Relations with the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Dawn joined the team at the Home Builders Association of Michigan in 1996 as the Political Affairs Director and was recently promoted to the Executive Vice President of Government Relations. In that role, she is directly responsible for lobbying on behalf of members on issues that impact education, taxation, workforce development, and economic development. Currently, her focus is working closely with the Housing Michigan Coalition to work on creating more attainable housing. She is also responsible for the political operations and making sure candidates and legislators on both sides of the aisle are elected who support the mission of the Home Builders Association of Michigan. To complement those efforts, she is also the executive director of HBAM's nonprofit Skilled to Build Michigan Foundation, where she is focused on cultivating, educating, and recruiting the workforce of tomorrow today. Prior to joining the Home Builders Association of Michigan, Dawn spent 10 years working in the Michigan legislature, starting as an intern for a state senator and ending her time as the legislative director for a state representative.
Wow. Welcome aboard, Dawn. That is a mouthful right there.
That is. Wow, I feel old. I always tell my members I started when I was 4.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
Yeah. Wow, you said an absolute mouthful there. So the Home Builders Association. Dawn, what are you doing for us consumers buying houses, building houses, and the builders? What is your role? How are you fighting the fight?
Well, we fight the fight every day, and I'll tell you what. Starting in 1996, I've seen a lot in the housing industry. 96, the times were good, and we had homes being built, and then we went through that '08, drastic drop, and we're slowly coming out of rebuilding. And it's, as we were talking earlier, everything connects to housing, and you can't just fix housing in a bubble. And I hate to use that phrase because of the housing bubble that we went through, but you really have to look at everything. It's a big ecosystem. And so our focus right now is working with the Housing Michigan Coalition to provide local units of government the tools to work with builders, developers, and nonprofits to create that workforce housing that is needed in every community across the state, from the border to the UP. And it really would allow them to look at what their community needs, because as we know, every community is very different. Communities in Livingston County are very different from communities in Wayne County or Leelanau County. And it's really allowing them to work with that builder and developer and nonprofits to see what can be done to make the numbers work on paper for a builder to create that workforce housing anywhere from 60 to 120% of area median income.
Okay, so you talked about the workforce people. Are you meaning the workforce that works here wants to live here and they want affordable housing? Is that where you're going?
Exactly. Yep. What we are seeing across the state is, and because you've mentioned how long I've been around in this process, I've been engaged in many coalitions. And the thing that's very unique about this coalition is our executive committee is made up of myself representing builders and developers. We have Housing North, which is a nonprofit in the northern, western part of the state. They take up 10 counties. You have the Grand Rapids Chamber representing business, and then you have the Michigan Municipal League representing, local units of government. And the thing that's very unique about that is we are all speaking with one voice about the need for workforce housing. Because what we're seeing is if workers can't work in their community, it's really impacting businesses and their availability of having talent come and work for them. So it's really those workers that are missing out on having the opportunity to live, work, and play near where they work every day. And especially with gas prices being as high as they are right now, people don't want to drive 45 minutes one way to get to work. And so it's that workforce housing that is so crucially needed in our state, so that businesses and economic development can thrive as well.
Wow. Okay. When you talk about workforce housing and you talk about the median income, I mean, I don't know. Can you throw a number on that? Is there like what is that number for affordable housing, I guess, that we're looking for here? Can we even build houses to meet that median income with the way prices are going up so much?
Yeah, it's tough right now, and that's why these tools are needed so that local governments can give tax relief to builders and developers based on what they're building. So they're very targeted and very strategic. We have four bills that are moving through the legislature. They're currently sitting in the local government and municipal finance committee in the House. We're hoping for a final hearing next week, and then they'll move out. They've already come through the Senate with bipartisan support, overwhelming bipartisan support in the Senate. They were voted out. We've been very blessed. And when we kicked off this coalition on April 15th of last year, we looked for Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate that we knew would be able to put politics aside and really focus on an issue that is crucial in our state, and that's for workforce housing. So when we look at affordable housing, I've got some numbers.
Hmm.
You have between 0 and 30% of your area median income, which is those individuals are eligible for public vouchers. So you're looking at some of the MISHDA programs. If you go through the 30 to 60% AMI, they're eligible for low income housing tax credits and funding units. Your attainable housing really hits that, 60 to 80% AMI, or if you're looking at 80 to 120% of your AMI, those individuals really are not eligible for any program or assistance. And then you're looking at market rate, which is 120% AMI or higher. And those are the individuals who, they're in the game every day, right? They're putting in their offers. And a lot of times, Vic, you were talking about, seeing how quick the market is right now and how hot it is. Homes are going for over asking price and they're getting in a bidding war. So when you really look at that 60 to 120, there really is not a program available for them. And what these tools would do is allow builders, developers, and nonprofits to receive kind of a tax break so that they can make the numbers work to make those houses, built and put into communities.
Okay, quite a question there. So you're talking about a potential new bill, and with what you're trying to get through the House or wherever you're trying to get that through, this would give the builders tax credits or something that they could pass on to the consumer to keep it more affordable. To put it in layman's
Yes,
terms.
exactly. Exactly.
Is this targeted at single family development more, or are you looking at multifamily or a combination?
It's both. That's the
Okay.
beautiful thing of all of these tools, while very similar in targeting that 60 to 120% AMI, they're very different in what they allow. So Senator Brinks out of Muskegon has a bill that deals more with rentals and 4 units or less. And so there has to be a $5,000 investment minimum in that. And then that tax break is however the local government wants to work with that builder, developer, or nonprofit. You have a very similar bill that was introduced by Senator Horn out of Frankenmuth, who's a Republican. So you have a Democrat that has one, a Republican that has the other. And his is more mixed use, family owned, 5 units or more, $50,000 minimum investment. We have another bill that was introduced by Senator Jeremy Moss out of Southfield, a Democrat, that would expand neighborhood enterprise zones. And the nice thing about that is, while that's already a known quantity for builders and developers, is this really focuses on infill projects. So you couldn't create a neighborhood enterprise zone where there was no existing infrastructure. So this would really look at where could we go into communities and do some infill projects. And then the last bill that we have moving through is Senator Schmidt, a Republican out of Traverse City, and he has, and this is how long I've been around. When I started, we called them PILTs, payment in lieu of taxes, and now they're called pilots. But if in a traditional PILT or pilot program, you need state or federal funding to assist in that program. Senator Schmidt's bill would allow a builder, developer, or nonprofit to work with a local municipality without that state or federal funding attached to it. And so that's just one more tool that kind of expands an already existing program, so that builders and developers can, again, it's making those numbers work on paper, so that these projects can be accomplished and put in communities.
How much? I listened to you speak before, and you were talking about the cost that it takes a developer in the township or the local municipality. That's a big percentage of the cost. Do you have any numbers on that to put this into perspective?
I know numbers that our nationalists kind of put out is about 40% is due to regulations at the local, state, and federal level. So, I don't want to pick on any
Right,
one
right.
level of government. It's kind of all
We'll
across
pick
the
on all of
board.
them.
You'll pick all of them. That's right. Equal opportunity,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Uh-huh.
But especially now you look at material costs, right? Lumber. When we were going through COVID, we were hearing that lumber packages had essentially doubled for the same exact footprint of a home. And then, you've got, I could talk for days on, you've got baby boomers as builders, and we lost a generation when, everybody kind of left our state. We lost that generation of people going into the industry. And so it's kind of the perfect storm of everything coming together that is really dramatically increasing the cost of housing right now.
Well, one of the things that we have focused on or studied a bit in our industry is the demographics. And I really feel that as a nation, as a state, we don't hear about it on the news about how big the millennials are. And we heard from Barry Habib, who is a mortgage guru that we follow for market conditions in our industry, is that you could have predicted the recession in 2008 if we would have paid attention to the birth rate in this country, which dropped dramatically in the 1970s into the 1980s. And then the millennials started being born in the early 90s up until about 2000. And even the Gen Zs, which is I think what they call after the millennials, are almost as big as the millennials, but there's 45 billion. What is it?
No, yeah,
Is it million? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little early. I need a second cup of coffee here.
45 billion. We're going to need a bigger planet.
We're sending them to Mars.
Going to need a bigger house.
So there's 45 million young adults right now, which are between the ages of 23 years old and 39. They're about to turn 40. And when you look at housing, okay, and you said how interconnected housing is to everything. Well, what do we personally work for? Okay. We work for our families.
Yeah.
Or we work to exist, which in America, we hope that everybody has a home.
We work to pay our house payment.
Yeah, yeah. So the basic need of housing, shelter is what fuels everything. And
Yes.
I don't think anybody has paid attention, or not enough people have paid attention to what the demographic is. I mean, for instance, if you are a school district, local, state, federal, whatever, shouldn't you be paying attention to the birth rate every
Yes.
year? Because that is your kindergarten class in 5 years.
And that's your
Yes.
home buyers in 33 years.
Correct.
You know,
Yes.
hey, and going back on that stat there, Dawn, the data we have right now is about, the average first-time home buyer is about 33 years old. We've got about 5.1 million a year coming to that position to buy a home, but yet the home builders, from the data we have, there's only about 1.1 million homes being built nationwide. So, and we see this shortage seeing at least another 5 to 7 years before we see any relief. What are you seeing on that end, or are we wrong on these numbers?
No, I'll run through some numbers quickly. And it always kind of is an eye opener, even for me when I started doing the math. And math was never my strong point in school. When we talk about Algebra 2 requirements, I always say I never took Algebra 2, but I did take Algebra twice. I don't know if that counts or not.
I did too.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Hey,
And
wait a minute. We're mortgage people. We're supposed to
know.
know math.
We do
And
know
so
math.
when you look at it, in 2005 was the last time that we really built in this state a significant amount of homes. So in 2005, there were roughly 54,721 single family permits pulled in this state. You moved to 2007, that number dropped to 15,000. You dropped to 2009, that number dropped to just about 6,900. And
Wow.
this year, we are projecting just a little over 17,000 new builds. So each year we've continued to grow, but we haven't grown to the point where, we'll go back and look and baby boomers as builders, right? Like the average age of our builder member. Now we don't have every builder as a member in the state, but I think the last time we checked, the average age was about 60. And so there's a great opportunity for young people to get into our industry, but we're not building what we need, to your point, to even keep up. And then I want to go back to those millennials, those 33-year-olds who are getting ready to buy their first home. How much college debt are they carrying with them?
$6 trillion across the United States right now.
That impacts their ability, right, to look at a home and to look at a mortgage, and what's that going to do to their monthly, to live to work, which, I think at the end of the day, COVID has said to a lot of people, I want to kind of change the way my life operates, right? Like we all of a sudden we're stuck in our homes for a year because we couldn't go anywhere. And you had people who then, the remodel side of our industry is doing very well because people wanted what? They needed another home office. Their kids were home doing virtual learning. They needed more broadband is a huge issue right now. And we were seeing that as an issue prior to COVID. But when you're looking at businesses really considering whether they're going to bring their employees back full time or can they work from anywhere, that home is becoming a bigger part of their life, of their daily life, because they might be using it as a home as well, but they're, it's more of a work-life balance.
You just brought up a couple points about the baby boomer builders. The average age of a builder is about 60 years old. And as these baby boomer builders start to retire, we need more builders coming in. However, as we spoke a little earlier, back in 05, 06, there was plenty of spec money. Any builder could go get to build a spec home. There was plenty of money available. But now we're seeing the little mom and pop shops, people building 5, 6, 7 homes a year, that they're unable to get financing on spec loans. whereas these big developers, they don't even require a construction loan. They're doing it on their own credit lines. Are we going to see, what's going to happen there? Is spec money going to come back? That's a big question in our sandbox.
It certainly hasn't.
Yeah, and so I'm a little concerned there. And then also, due to the pandemic, and we have a shortage of workers. I know during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of our skilled trades in construction go south, and so we're losing a lot of them. A lot of local builders that I work with, they used to build a spec home, a $400,000, $500,000 spec home, or a custom build in 6 months, 7 months. Now they're 11 to 12 months because of labor shortage, and then of course they're scared of. What was that?
Supply chain issues on
Yeah.
being able to get windows and appliances and siding again, it goes back to that perfect storm of everything has kind of hit our industry and it's been kind of building. I mean, we talk about people who left during COVID. We actually saw a lot of our members leave back when Katrina hit down south. I always say that was kind of our personal Katrina up here. So to throw out another number is when I started 100 years ago, we had almost 12,000 members in our state. And then we saw a lot of those members leave back in that '08, '09 timeframe. Um, and a lot of them did not come back. So we're hovering around 5,000 members right now. We're still the largest construction trade industry in the state that represents, residential construction. But we need to fill that kind of generational gap where when the downturn was so big in our state, if you were a builder and you had children, chances were you were encouraging them not to get into the industry because there really wasn't a future at that time. You saw schools cut their construction trades programs
Mhm.
because, again, why would you have a training if there really wasn't a future in the industry right now? And so we're still rebuilding from that lost generation and those programs that went away, and we're starting to see them come back. But as my members point out to me every day, we have a labor shortage right now. And while it's great that we're cultivating and walking in that space, we really need to bring people in, to the industry because the jobs, and they're not just jobs, they're honestly really good paying careers. And that's the message we need to get out.
So, what would be available? Let's say you had a young adult, maybe in their mid to late 20s, that's been working, but maybe is looking for a better career opportunity. I know that, for instance, in our community in Livingston County, Howell High School has a fabulous building program. And I know that they're putting they've never stopped it to my knowledge, and are putting more into it. Which is obviously, as you said, great, but those young people are, 4+ years away from probably entering the workforce. For somebody in their 20s that might be considering some type of a construction career, that likes to work with their hands and their head and, be very active, what opportunities are out there for somebody that has maybe no experience for internships or entry-level positions?
Yeah, or vocational training, something of that sort.
Yeah. So my best story is a while ago. Gosh, it was probably in 18. We went around the state with then Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley to promote trades, as if you were looking at a career switch, the trades is a good place to come in. And we met a young kid. His name was Hunter. Is Hunter. He was 21 years old, and he literally walked up to a job site one day and said, "This is what I want to do. How do I do it?" And the guy on the crew at the home being built said, "Show up tomorrow at 7 a.m." Hunter is now a trim carpenter. His mantra is, if you're on time, you're late. He figures everybody should be, where they need to be 15 minutes early.
I like that
He
one.
figures the only
I'm
debt
gonna use
you
that
really
one. If you're on time, you're late. I like that.
if the only debt you should really carry is a mortgage. He paid cash for his truck. And those are the opportunities, I almost hate to say it, but for our industry, anybody who is willing to show up and work every day and learn and grow can do pretty well if they get connected with a builder or somebody in the industry, because the demand is there. And again, it's a good paying career where we see, kids, if that's their aptitude, they can own their own business by the time they're 30. Or they can work for somebody and do very well. Like we always say, the builders of today are the toy owners of tomorrow. They're buying boats, snowmobiles, and really living life and having a good life to boot. Now it's hard work, um, but the opportunities are there. And so we've actually started working with the Michigan Department of Education, and we will be launching a statewide recognized credential for students who come out of the construction trades and meet our credential goals. And we will be able to pair them with 300 of our members across the state who are willing to hire a student who's coming out of a construction trades program. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We've also partnered with the Department of Corrections has a phenomenal program called Vocational Village, where they have soon to be parolees and returning citizens who are getting their skills in welding and machine and CNC and plumbing. And we connect them with our members who are willing to hire a returning citizen. And we also work with veterans. We've created a guidebook specifically for veterans and broken it down by military branch and have said, if you did this in the Army, you should look at this skilled trade. And we have about 300 members of ours that would hire a veteran as well. And so we're looking at how do we look outside the box to cultivate, educate, and recruit, the recruiting being the key phrase right now because of the demand. But there's so many opportunities, and it's just getting the word out that if you can show up every day and produce, and the kicker is you have to show up again tomorrow, there's probably a good career for you in the industry.
I have a question. So, because all I hear is builders of the work shortage. Do they contact the state or contact you? How does a builder say, "Hey, I'm looking for people"? How do they connect with you and your affiliates?
Yeah, so we actually have a questionnaire that we send out. Well, we're trying to get back into it, but once a month that says, "Are you hiring?" And it's a really quick thing for a builder or somebody in the industry. And again, when I say industry, it's not necessarily a builder. It could be, a roofer, a framer, a sider, window installer. It could be even somebody who sales, who understands the industry. The range is just from A to Z, quite honestly. And then we send that out to about, I think the last time I looked, our list was about 900, and we send it to Michigan Works. We send it to construction trades teachers to show their students that there are viable opportunities in the industry. We send it to any veteran that's been linked into our database, and really try and send it out and make that connect. So while Skill to Build Michigan doesn't do any training, I look at us as kind of the spoke on a bike, right? And then we have all the things that shoot off the wheels. And we're a connector. And so
You're the
our website
Indeed.
is, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that is.
get a hold of me, sign up at Skill to Build Michigan. Any of our 22 local associations. I know we're fortunate that the Greater Lansing Home Builders actually is in our office. And so I hear them. She connects her people, with individuals who come in who are looking for careers. She does job fairs. We've got 22 locals around the state that are also working to connect employees with employers.
What is coming out of, I guess, Lansing, this would be right now that we see on the forefront, something new? Where's the shining, where's the silver lining in this? Do we have something coming out here soon that's going to be a big push and everybody can see the benefits?
In terms of career opportunities
Or just
or
the building
or
in general? What's the
policy
good
or
news?
for, so I think the good news is we're very close on our Housing Michigan Coalition legislation, which again puts more tools into the hands of locals to work with builders and developers. And once that gets passed and hopefully signed into law by the governor, then it becomes an educational process on our end, right? We need to let our builders and developers know municipals and local governments need to be made aware that these tools are now in existence. And so the education phase of that begins, and making that aware so that those tools are actually used. The other thing is, we've been um, also partnering with another coalition called the Michigan Roadmap to Prosperity. And that is dealing with all of these American Recovery Plan dollars, ARPA dollars, that have come into our state to the tune of about 6 billion, I believe. Um, and that coalition has worked for over 6 months, and probably coming up to also close to a year, on putting together a very well-rounded, thoughtful plan on how those federal dollars can be used to help Michigan and put us in a position of strength coming out of COVID. And so while they're one-time dollars, they have specific uses. We want to make sure when we look back in 5 or 10 years that we've put the money into programs that have moved Michigan forward, and that they weren't just squandered and wasted. And so one of those is, we're hearing a lot of stories of employers who, because of the workforce shortage issue, they're actually providing housing for their employees. So Shorts Brewery just recently up in the Beulah area bought a hotel that they are converting into apartments because their workforce has no housing availability in that area. So one of the things that we have recommended as a coalition is we've recommended some one-time funding, I think to the tune of about $10 million, where employers, if they're willing to assist their employees within that, again, 60 to 120% of area median income, help them either with down payment assistance, help them with rent, help them with their housing needs so that they can keep the talent that they need to honestly keep their business running. And so there's a lot of things that are coming out of that. Earlier this year, the legislature passed infrastructure budget that deals with water, because that's such a big issue in the state, right? You saw Detroit, those individuals in Detroit who got hit with flooding time and time again last year. How do we build up the infrastructure so that you eliminate some of that damage to housing? And so there's a lot of good coming out. I know I was just in conversations this week where we're looking at, and we'll have to see if it stays in until the end, but a $3,000 scholarship that can be used for individuals who want to go into a trades program. And so there's a lot of good in terms of the financial coming out of Lansing to assist in housing and infrastructure and community development and workforce training and development. And how do we look at supply chain issues? And again, those are all pieces of the puzzle, because you can't just look at housing as kind of a monolith and as a one issue. Everything touches into it, right?
Wow, yeah, it's all connected. One of the concerns, or I guess this is both sides of the coin when we talk or discuss affordable housing versus housing availability. And when someone wants to come into let's just take Livingston County, for example, and they want affordable housing to meet that median income, the average sale price in Livingston County is what, about 340,000 now, something like that.
Rising, yeah.
But then if a developer's trying to come in and build homes for 250, 275,000, are you getting pullback from the communities because they don't want it to affect their home values by bringing in, I guess, lower cost housing? I've heard both sides of that. You hear that?
That's a huge issue. And I think when I spoke at the Livingston Chamber Alliance earlier this
Mhm.
year, one of kind of my calls to action is, especially to businesses, is when you look at a need for a business or an employer in your community that is looking for that workforce, that attainable housing. A lot of times when builders go before their local, either planning commissions, or the process where you'll have 7 or 8 people who come in and start screaming the loudest, right? Like, not in my backyard. We like to call them NIMBYs. And at the end of the day, though, that doesn't help your community if the housing isn't available. And so One of the things that we're encouraging others who are supportive of those developments coming in because it's good for the community is, and it just kind of shocks me that when you say $250,000 that people are like, oh, but our property values. I'm like, that's still a
Yeah.
good house, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not
Hell
talking
yeah.
you're not talking necessarily Section 8 housing. You're still talking, a good product, and you're building up that community, which, here's the thing that we say to our members all the time too. And, even if our members aren't able to build kind of that first step in housing, right? That
Right.
lower price point. Those individuals, as they build their personal wealth, they're going to move up into that next home, right? They're going to stay in the community and build up and build that new home and that more expensive home and build that and buy that more expensive home. But you've got to get them in the door. And so, communities really need to support builders and developers as they're building maybe that workforce housing and realize that it truly is an economic bump to a community. And one of the things that we're starting to say is, as a state, if economic development is important to our state, you need to have the housing to house those employees that are going to come with that economic development that's being developed. And I'll go back to my number of 2005. Those 54,000 homes are hitting 17, 18, 19 years in age, which means what? They're going to need new furnaces, they're going to need new roofs, they're going to need new windows. Like, we don't have the stock that is, kind of a benefit when companies looking to come here. That's one of the things they're looking at. And one of the most interesting stats I just heard last week was from it's now the Michigan Lodging and Hospitality. They used to be the Michigan Restaurant Association. Their number one issue of their members, housing across the state, not just in resort towns. That's their members' number one concern, is the lack of housing for their workforce.
You know, I, I guess I don't want to get opinionated, but I guess I'm going to, because in our community, I would love to see a 500 unit area with affordable housing. I have a daughter that's 24 years old. I would love her to be able to have affordable housing. If we had 500 homes, we got 500 families shopping local, eating local, working local, building that community.
Right.
And we need that.
Well, when you look at, for instance, the Detroit market, and you look at, post World War II, when they started developing Redford, Farmington, Livonia, Westland, Garden City, the average home was 1,000 square foot ranch or a bungalow that was not only affordable and attainable, but it met the needs of that first time home buyer. Nobody has built that in this state hardly anywhere that I can see in the last 30 years. And what I have heard, like what we've talked to other, like when we talked to the Michigan or Livingston County Home Builders Association, one of the issues from a development standpoint is the cost to develop the land. Yes. So if you're going to develop a piece of property with all of the taxes, hookup fees to utilities, the infrastructure that's got to be built, why would you spend millions of dollars to build a $250,000 home? You're better off from a profitability standpoint of, building a $500,000 home, which is what we've seen in a lot of communities. And it's not just Livingston County. Look at Oakland County. Look at Wayne County. I have adult children in their mid to late 20s, and I talked to one of my daughter's best friends, and they live in Southfield. They love the area, okay? They live in the Detroit market, they work in the Detroit market, and they were actually considering buying a piece of property to build a home in Southfield because the land was very affordable. And I had a long discussion with the young man to say, okay, here's the things you have to look into. And I told him, I said, you need to call the city, tell them what you're going to build, and ask them what the taxes will be when that house is built. And when you look at these older areas that have infill lots that are available, or they have properties that probably could be torn down and redeveloped, today's buyers will, the taxes are very unreasonable.
Oh, yeah, they're like 60 mils.
Oh
in
yeah,
Southfield.
it's ridiculous. So you look and go, okay, so there is property in some of those city areas that could be redeveloped. It's not ever going to get redeveloped if there isn't cooperation with the municipalities to say, well, we better do something with our tax rates, because nobody's going to build a $200,000 house on a $15,000 piece of land and pay $20,000 a year in taxes.
Yeah, well, hey, let's talk about that point, because you brought up a good point. These developers are coming in and spending millions of dollars for the infrastructure, the roads, the sewer hookup, and all of that. Why would they build a $250,000 home? They need to build a $500,000 home to make a profit. And Dawn, you brought up that the state has all the $6 billion and something to help Michigan. It almost seems like, boy, these developers should be coming in, but that's where we need the subsidy, is the state to come in and help with the infrastructure, almost as the break, so we could come in and build these affordable homes.
Yeah, and we have some money in for infrastructure as well. Like water was a big one, and we're looking at broadband, different form of infrastructure, but also very important is people are looking at where do they want to build or buy or live. If you have broadband that's not really keeping up with, it used to be kind of a luxury and now it's a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we look at the different things that impact all of that, there is money for infrastructure. And then the biggest issue is going to be, once it gets allocated, how does it get deployed into these areas, and how do individuals and municipalities kind of take advantage of that? And I know one of the things that's been a big issue for local governments is they've also received a pot of money. And at the end of the day, they're kind of waiting to see them what they get from the state that's going to complement their federal dollars. Because if you can do a big project, they would rather do a big project. One of the other issues, and it doesn't necessarily impact housing as much when you talk about a build season, but it does impact, roads or sewer, is the longer it takes to get those dollars deployed, we're going to start losing a construction season, in terms of, if the job isn't shovel ready, our people are going to go, work in other states that also are receiving these dollars and are ready to go and have been deploying them. So, we're happy to see that the legislature is starting to move on those dollars, but we're also looking at the fact that, although driving to work today, clearly we are under construction, and there aren't many places in the state where I haven't been stuck in construction at some point. But it becomes really that competition among 49 other states if they're ready to go with projects, and we're still kind of waiting for the dollars to be allocated. So that's going to be the next step, is now how do either municipalities or those who are able to apply for those dollars, what's that step look like?
Right. I know personally of two developments, and these were 200-unit developments. Both kind of got turned down or just got put on hold because they needed the adjacent roads because it couldn't handle it. One would need a roundabout, in order. They got turned down because it couldn't handle the traffic. And then one by my home because they needed US 23 to be widened, or they needed a traffic light and have some different lanes put in. And it kind of got down, and it got shut down and just kind of got caught in a stalemate right now.
Yeah, and I bet that happens in a lot of parts of the state, particularly those that are a little bit more rural in nature.
Yeah.
Which is a big chunk of our state.
And our county.
Yeah.
And then to go back to your point of, if you're going to go through all the hoops, which, whether you're building a $200,000 home or a $500,000 or $1 million home, the process is still the same. You're going to go where you're going to get a little bit bigger margin of your profit return because the process is the same. And so
that's the American way.
A lot of times our builders get kind of slapped for that. But if you have to go through all of the same process, where are you going to go? You're going to go where you get more bang for your buck.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So that's where the tax breaks are important. And I think, it's very easy for us on a local level not to see the big picture and what's happening in Lansing, but it is so important because it impacts everybody, particularly. And if you're, again, like you talked about, the 60 to 120% of the median income, I mean, that is not low income. You
Right.
know, that's a huge demographic that is completely underserved in the state.
And then let's go back to the baby boomers. You start looking at, we are an aging population in Michigan that's living longer. And so if we're not bringing in that younger generation and we're not able to bring them into either business opportunities where they can be employed, but if the housing isn't here, they're not going to come here.
Right.
At some point, we're going to start losing even more. And so, my other conversation that I've started with groups in Lansing, and I'm not ready to jump in full on it this year because it's an election year. But as an aging population, one of the things we're also going to need, excuse me, is homes for seniors who want to age in place.
Mm-hmm.
I use my parents as the perfect example. They are living in a two-bedroom, or I'm sorry, a four-bedroom, two-story home in Okemos. My mother is on a walker. She keeps one on the main level, one on the upper level. Their laundry's in the basement, but we're at some point we're going to have to look at what do those aging in place homes look like and who is going to build them, because that also solves another problem where it can free up some housing for people to either move into as first time home buyers or to move up into. And so that's going to be a conversation we're going to have. But part of the reason I'm not willing to have it yet is then we get into proposal A. You're getting into a situation where seniors who have been in their homes for a while have probably been capped under proposal A,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they're probably have their homes paid off. So that means you're moving them into a home with possibly a mortgage and a higher tax rate. And so I think that's going to be a conversation that we're going to have as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't
We
even
see that
consider
every
that.
no, we
Yeah.
see that every day.
Yeah.
You know, I was contacted recently by several homeowners that are trying to get out of their homes that are too big to buy a condo, and it's exactly what you described. They have very low tax rates because of Proposal A, and their homes are free and clear, but they don't qualify necessarily even for a mortgage because they don't really have anything but Social Security, maybe a little bit of pension. Some people we can help if they have retirement assets that we can create a stream of income to get them a temporary mortgage. But I get those calls every single month. And again, some people we can help, some people can't. You know, people have said, well, what about a bridge loan? You know, pulling equity out of their current home to buy cash for the next one. That doesn't work for everybody because of
Right.
their particular, you know, retirement situation. So you hate to say it for somebody that's retiring, somebody that's in their 60s and 70s, knowing that they're probably going to live to their 80s and 90s, they need to think about things differently, because making that move when you're in your 90s, when you've got walkers, wheelchairs, other assistant devices, I hate to say you've waited too long. We've seen some good condo development in our area that, you know, but a little bit, I want to say higher end. It's really between 300,000 and 400,000. They're beautiful ranch style dwellings with garages, and so, you know, so that it feels more like a home than an apartment situation. But that still takes a feat to get that homeowner, you know, mentally and physically to the point of moving. Obviously, a ton of support from family, but the whole financial part of that is also somewhat challenging as well.
Well, you brought up a really good point, because let's take Dawn's parents for example. If they were to sell their home, it's free and clear, and then let's say they just go buy a ranch condo, you know, for cash or a mortgage, it doesn't matter. They're going to get taxed the new tax rate, which kind of stops them from wanting to sell to free up inventory, for one thing. It would almost be great, and you could take this to Washington, Dawn, you know, that maybe that proposal A, or they're capped out, should transfer over if you're over 65. And that's the benefit of you paying all your taxes all your life, is you go into a lower tax rate to free up inventory and get this system moving and be a win-win. So I don't know. Sorry, I went on a tangent.
We're not sending Dawn to Washington. We got to keep her in Lansing. We need her in Lansing. But that's a very valid point. You know, and here's the thing. We know that from a government standpoint, we know how bad 2008 was, okay? And the long-term effects to the townships, cities, communities that, of course, get tax funding. But on the same token now, 14 years later, as they resell and re-tax these homes, we are now going to see, I believe, in taxable revenue to state and local government units now going through the roof. Am I wrong? So
I don't think
you look at that and go, okay, we're not going to have as many funding issues as we did in the past, but then we're going to have these inequities between the first-time home buyers, those baby boomers that need to move on and do something else and go, okay, it's great to say, that the economy's good and it's strong or whatever, but, this is going to slow things down, impede, those first-time home buyers getting in the market, impede those seniors that want to, make life a little bit easier. I have a neighbor that is in his 90s. He's a World War II veteran, and he lives in a 3,000 square foot home that he probably built in 1973. Now, the man's in very good health. I see him walking every morning, almost every day, 12 months out of the year in Michigan, and he looks much younger than he is. The only reason I guess his age is because I know he was a Marine in World War II. But you go, I don't think he plans on going anywhere anytime soon.
Wow. Unbelievable, man.
there's a lot. I mean, again, you can't just look at housing as a single issue because there's so many things that come into play in terms of, who can afford, who can, taxes, regulations, communities. It all so interconnects, and we're just one piece of the puzzle, but we're an important piece of that puzzle if we're going to have a strong economy in our state.
It's the basic need.
So how do we as a consumer, or we as builders, we as community help the cause to push to get things rolling so everybody can benefit? Where do we help?
So, not to bring politics into it, but it is an election
Sure,
year.
bring it in.
And so, and I'm not going to pull on any one party, but, as it was mentioned, I also do the politics and look at candidates and endorsements for our association. And one of the things that I've been asking candidates as I've been meeting with them, and this is Republicans and Democrats, and it's from all across the state. It's not just one particular area. I ask, what are the top 3 issues you're hearing on the door? What are the top 3? You want to know what number 1 is, or at least within the top 3. I'm not going to say it's number 1 all across the state, but within the top 3 is housing. And it's housing at all price points for all individuals.
Well, that's
And
good.
I heard it is good. And I've heard it from a candidate who's running in my area here. I heard it from, you mentioned Southfield. I heard it from a candidate running in Southfield. I heard it yesterday from a candidate running in the Petoskey area. And so it is all over the state, that on the minds of not just those who want to be elected, but those who are living in communities, is the need for housing. Now, we've also talked about what that housing looks like. So in everybody's mind, that may look a little different depending on where you are. But as we go into an election year, I think it's important that, individuals who are going to vote really talk to those who are running and have a conversation about what are the issues that they're going to focus on when they come to Lansing. And not only what are they going to focus on, but are they really willing to work with those on the other side of the aisle to move Michigan forward? Because we have become such a polarized um, electorate that I think it's important that the people who are going to come and serve the entire state as well as your local area are willing to come in and put maybe political differences aside where they can, and really focus on the issues that are important to the state, that are going to move us forward. And that ties us all together, right? Whether you're a builder, whether you're an elected official, whether you're a business owner, or a school district, how are we all going to work together to make sure that we're really building strong communities, so that we can attract people to come and live here? Because as I always say, tents do not work well in our state. We need houses. And whatever that housing looks like, whether it's mixed use, whether it's a condo, an apartment, a townhouse, not everybody wants to live in a single family home.
Right.
But we also shouldn't be forcing them to choose and kind of putting them where they may not want to be. We have to have all that housing availability.
Well, and as an elected official, the whole premise of that is that you represent your constituents from your community. So I would not potentially be the right person to tell Southfield what to do, or Detroit, or Petoskey. But if everybody brings their ideas together to Lansing and sees the commonality, hopefully that they can come up with solutions that work in multiple communities, because the need is the same. Like you said, it might look a little different, but the need is the same.
But it's getting, there's so many facets that this involves. It's everybody's got to come together between the Drain Commission, the Road Commission, the builders, the developers, the local municipalities and government, and the workers. My God, it's astronomical. I mean, this is a huge thing that takes a huge effort to make it successful. And I hope Michigan can do this, and I want to be part of that. But because we can turn this whole thing around.
You know, when drain commissions are looking at doing drains and road commissions are looking at doing roads, and then you bring in the broadband issue, like if they could all coordinate their efforts so you're only tearing up something once, as opposed to, the road commission doing part of the roads, and then water infrastructure decides they need to do sewer 2 years later and they're tearing up the road that was just done. A lot of that communication and working together would go a long way and probably save quite a bit of funding as well.
And timing. It's like when they built, the interstate highway system back, after World War II there. It's pretty well thought out. They thought that out pretty good. It actually works pretty good, but boy, I hope everybody comes together. But as we wrap up the show, Dawn, what closing words do you have, closing ideas, and on how we can help? And just from your heart, where do you see this going?
Oh, I have high hopes that it's going to go in a positive direction. I mean, I do think as people start to work together, it does come to where community does need to support those developments coming in, as businesses support building and developers for the need. And to the point where those locally elected realize that, out of 7 to 10 screamers, I like to call them, who may show up in opposition to a development plan, really look at the bigger need of a community in that businesses will come and support those developments that are going to provide that much needed workforce housing in their community, because it does all interconnect. If business can't attract talent, it's going to make it very hard for them to succeed as well. And to your point earlier, Vic, those people who move into those developments, they're shopping in your community. They're supporting restaurants. They're they're part of your fiber, right? Like they have kids in school. They're part of the PTA. They've got kids on Little League.
They are part of the infrastructure.
Yes, they are. And so it's really taking a step back and looking at the greater good and what it does for a community.
Very well said. Danielle, any closing words here as we wrap up the show?
Thank you, Dawn. It's been a great conversation this morning, very informative. So we will be anxious to continue following the Home Builders Association of Michigan and, keep up the good work and the fight. So,
well, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We'd like to thank Dawn Crandall, my co-host, Mrs. Danielle Boote, and people, let your voice be heard. This is a very important issue, and it affects us all. My name is Victor Bals, and we'll see you the next time here on A Smarter Way Home.